When we talk about disaster events, it's important to consider our pets. And when we think about bringing our pets with us, it's really important to have all the important things for them in case we can't return home. So as we make our plan, it's important to think about the routes we might evacuate. And so in that plan, we're going to look at potential hotels, pet-friendly shelters. And what a pet-friendly shelter is, in case you don't know, is just like we have human shelters in the event of evacuation, there are shelters that will allow us to carry our pets with us. And there are various different formats. In some formats, the pets are actually cared for by volunteers and shelter staff. There are situations where we can care for our pet with us in our own space. And there's other situations that are kind of a hybrid of the two. In the event that we are dealing with an evacuation amidst current times, we also might find ourselves and our entire family and pets in a hotel room. So there's various options, and this will vary depending on location and the type of event that we're experiencing. And so as we look at evacuating, we want to make sure we have very important things that our pets use on a daily basis. We may not have access to potable water, and so it's important to have enough water for our pets to carry them through for 7 to 14 days. The hope would be that we'd return home before that, but in the event that we don't, in that time span, we'd also have access to more supplies. We also want to bring our pets foods and any kind of treats, medications, and just all those items that would be so necessary for our pet to live the most normal and comfortable life during the evacuation. It's also important to bring our medical records with us in case our pets have health conditions, or also to show vaccine records. Because when we enter a shelter, oftentimes we're going to look for requirements such as making sure that animals have basic vaccinations so they're not exposed to potential disease and that they're not exposing other animals to disease. The other thing to consider is with the loss of infrastructure, we may not have access to Wi-Fi or telephone, and so in those cases having all that information with us is extremely important. So I talked about identification, and so forms of identification that we might see along the way obviously would be just simply collars and tags with the dog's information as well as our information. Now, these aren't always 100% because in the event that the animal gets loose and is running through debris, there's the chance that the collar can be removed, and so now the pet no longer has identification. Now, another form of identification that's more permanent would be a microchip. And so this can be embedded in various ways, mostly by a veterinarian. And so this provides permanent identification. And this is something that cannot be easily removed. And from the perspective of shelters and anybody doing rescue and anybody finding an animal post a disaster event, they're going to immediately scan the animal for a microchip because that's the quickest way to get the information on the pet and to make sure that the pet can be reunited with their owner. Now, with the microchip, in most cases, it's important to ask if they are registered automatically. Many times they are not, and this is a common mistake. Another thing that we think about as far as evacuation as well is what hotels are pet friendly, because in some cases you might have to find a pet friendly hotel. And so finding those on your evacuation route now would also help. Why we evacuate with our pets, number one, is in the event that we leave without our pets, there is a chance that they can be injured structurally if they're locked in a house, or they can escape. One of the other things to consider as well is the fact that in our option to evacuate, the animal might get away from us. So number one, it's important to have appropriate collars and leashes, but it's also really important to make sure that you have ways to find your pet in the event that they escape, because there's various reasons this can happen. They can escape from crates, they can escape from various areas, they're fearful, they're in new places. So it's really important to think about this. And so what we can do is we can contact our local shelters and rescue agencies, an organization such as like in the state of Florida where we have Emergency Support Function 17. And what that organization does is keep track of all things related to animals. And so in those cases, you would contact them and they would be able to put you in contact with the agency that's overseeing all the care and protection of animals that are being found post-event. And so it's important as we think about identification and these other things, having a plan and how we're going to find our pet. And one of the things that you can do now is to search by your city. search by your county, search by your state, lost dog, lost pet in whatever area. It'll be interesting to see what items come up. In some cases, it's not the local shelter, which would usually be the local agency that would be in charge of protecting these animals. So as we go and evacuate, there may be a chance that as we're moving around post-event, we might find a stray animal. And so it's very important to follow proper safety procedures. One of the things that may occur is this may not be a pet, this may be a stray animal, this may be a wild animal, this may be an animal that we don't know vaccination or health status of. And so it's very important to be very cautious when we attempt to help these animals, because we don't want to, number one, get the animal hurt, but number two, we need to think about our safety and protection. Now, ideally, we don't want to go rounding up animals without contacting our local shelter or other animal rescue or protection type agency. We also need to consider, if we have our own pets, we don't want to mix these animals, because we don't know how these other animals are going to interact with our own, as well as we don't know how our own will interact with them. This is a very stressful time during the event and after the event, and so it's really important to make sure we're keeping things as stress-free for our pets and for others. So in closing, it's very important to plan before the event and have a plan for a kit, or at least a partial kit put together, and check that kit periodically to make sure that everything is up to date and in date. And remember, if your pet's on any kind of prescriptions, if it appears that an event is coming, or if you're in a season where we're more commonly seeing events, we want to make sure that there's an option to get additional medications prior to the event, so that in the event that we are impacted, we can make sure that our pet is getting their medications and treated as long as possible until supplies can be replaced. The key is readiness and having a plan, and really kind of considering these things as a family. And remember, these events aren't just seasonal. There's all kinds of different events. They can happen anytime. And it's always important to consider our pets as much as we're considering our families, and know that there are times that these events may be unexpected. So the more you can do to plan and prepare and have this kit in a place that everybody knows where it is and is accessible is most important.